Greetings viewers, in today's video we are going to be disassembling the Tavor SAR 21 rifle. I'm going to do it in a similar fashion that I have with my previous disassembly videos. First thing I'm going to do is break it down as you would for just basic maintenance and cleaning, nothing spectacular for this particular weapon. You do not need any special tools for that. And then we're going to take it a step further and we're going to completely break this weapon down so you'll get a chance to see how you would swap out some of the trigger parts and remove the barrel, whether you were putting a caliber conversion kit in it or swapping it from right to left hand, or you just really want to do a good annual maintenance cleaning and get in and make sure you get everything nice and shiny. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Like I said, you do not need any special tools other than some sort of a punch for this first part. There are some pins that we need to pop out in order to get started. Through the process of this video, I am using the Tav tool. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced. And it is made by Shooting Sight. It has a basically just a bunch of flip out tools that you'll need on here. It's got a small punch, Allen wrench, flathead, Phillips. It's got the barrel wrench. It's got all the, again, tools that you're going to need for this. So it makes it really easy if you get your hands on one of these. If you have one of these weapons, I highly recommend it because then you're not having to hunt and look for wherever your barrel wrench went, or trying to figure out the sizes for the bolts because everything is already on this one tool for you in one convenient place. So like I said, you don't need any special tools for this first part. We're just going to need something you can use as a punch. You could even use the tip of a round, which is not recommended, but we're going to push out this first pin that's right here at the top rear of the weapon. This is going to allow us to swing the butt plate open and get the bolt out. So we're just going to push this pin, and again, it's going to lock out. You can see right here it is captured. If I pull on it, it will not come out. If your pin comes all the way out, something is wrong, or you broke something, you pushed too hard. So you may need to get that fixed. The entire bolt assembly will then slide out of the rear of the weapon. So we're going to set that to the side for now. So this butt plate will just swing back and forth. You can put that back and push the pin in just to hold it in place. We don't need to get in there right now. The other thing that we're going to do now is we're going to take out the trigger pack. So much like the pin right here on the butt of the weapon that we used to swing that open, there is a pin right here where the bolt lock and bolt release flipper is, if you will. So we just need to do the same thing. Again, this pin is captured, so we're just going to push from this side. We're just going to push, and the pin's going to pop out. Again, it is retained. So this little flipper still moves. We now need to push this pin out in the same manner. So those are both at their maximum extension. This black flipper now has the ability to go all the way open and allow our trigger pack to slide out of the bottom. Again, we can let those other pins back to their normal position just so they don't get snagged on anything. This is the Geissele Super Sabra trigger pack. It looks very similar to the stock one that's in there, just doesn't have all the Geissele writing on it. And some of these parts may look a little different, but same form, same function. So as of right now, that is all that you need to do to disassemble this weapon for basic maintenance and cleaning. Now I will tell you that it is a huge pain in the butt to get in here. If you thought cleaning an AR was a pain, to get in here and try and clean this chamber out. So again, recommended at least annual cleanings. Do the best job you can getting inside of here, cleaning everything out with a rag, wiping it out, putting your favorite gun cleaning product on it. I am a fan of Frog Lube, and I have been using it for years, ever since it came out. I used it the very first time on one of my weapons, and I was absolutely impressed with it, and I have not looked back yet. I am not sponsored. I'm not getting paid to tell you these things. I just like to share stuff that works for me. That does not mean that it will work for you. However, in my experience, it has done everything I needed to do. I know people like to complain about stuff and say, my friend's cousin's nephew used it and it didn't work, so therefore they don't like it, but my personal opinion and experience with it is it's great stuff and it works. So I'm going to continue to use it until it does not work. So again, we're basically done. So popping this open, making sure that you get down inside of here, get all of this as clean as best as you can reach, and do the best you can. Same thing, running a brush, or I use bore snakes to go down the, clean the barrel, clean your muzzle device, and just kind of generally clean off the outside. If you got a flashlight, make sure you clean off the lens a little bit, because sometimes whatever muzzle device you're using will throw some junk on there, and you don't want to cloud up your light. You want it to be as bright as possible for whenever you need it. So while we have the bolt out, I'm going to go ahead and jump into disassembling it for you. So let's get the gun out of the way. So again, this trigger pack does not get disassembled. Do not take any of these parts apart. Leave everything as is and clean it, in it, and around it the best that you can. Do not take anything out of this trigger pack. Leave it as one solid unit. All right, so with our Tavor bolt here, we've got two pieces. We've got this recoil spring and the timing bar that's underneath it here. This is a big rubber pad that's at the back, and our bolt is here. This is our piston. So in order to get this to be able to be disassembled, it's similar to an AR, and you'll understand why in just a second, because we've got our retaining pin here, but we've got to get this out of the way in order to be able to remove that retaining pin. So in order to do that, we have to pull this bar all the way to the rear. So this whole assembly needs to be as far back as possible, and we're going to push this bottom bar to the rear until you see it pop out of the back here, and it will not come out any farther. So you can try and grab it, move it. It sticks out just enough that it's going to allow us to remove this pin here. So take your punch, and then all we're going to do is push that pin out from the rounded side to the side that's got the head on it with the flat part. You can see that this pin has a cutout here, and that cutout basically is what rubs up against this bar, and if that bar is not out of the way, it will not allow this pin to be removed in order to disassemble the rest of the bolt. So we can leave that pulled straight to the rear. We can pull our bolt out of the front. And the firing pin is kind of a weird shape, so you kind of have to wiggle it a little bit. It's not completely rounded. It has a big flat spot right here. The rear portion of it is 90% rounded, and then the rest of it's flattened off, so you got to kind of wiggle it a little bit. There's also a spring that goes with it, that when it's installed, it goes on much like that. So that's all we need to disassemble for this. You can now give this a nice thorough cleaning. Again, put whatever lube and cleaning products you want on it, get it all nice and shiny. And you can take the extractor out of this. Again, just like an AR, there is an extra little piece inside of here. It's kind of a little, I call it a gumdrop. Same thing again, similar to an AR. You just have this one pin that we have to push from one side to the other. All right, so we're just gonna take our punch, and I usually put my thumb over the extractor here just to keep it from falling and losing any of the parts. You're gonna push that pin from one side to the other. It's gonna come all the way out. Set that aside, make sure you don't lose it. The extractor will come off, and then again, we've got this little green gumdrop shaped thing that helps provide resistance on the back of the extractor. And this extractor's got quite a bit of brass on it, so definitely need to get in there and clean that. And just again, clean this with your favorite cleaning product. All right, so I've got my bolt pieces all cleaned up and put aside. I'm gonna do the reassembly after we break this whole thing down, and then we'll just kind of do everything in a reverse order. So there's a couple things that need to happen here before we can actually get into the meat and potatoes. And again, what I'm about to demonstrate from here forward is beyond basic disassembly and maintenance. This is because you are swapping out aftermarket parts, or you're changing the barrel from right to left hand, you're doing a caliber conversion, or again, you're just doing a super deep clean, getting this thing disassembled and reaching all the nooks and crannies you can't while it's fully assembled. So on this weapon, I do have the raised aftermarket rail on the rear here. On the top of it, it is a 4mm bolt. Again, my Tav tool has that already pre-installed, so it's ready to go for me in case you are hunting around for your Allen wrenches and figuring out which size you need. There should be 2 bolts on the top of the stock rail. So again, I have just a single bolt right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that loosened up. All right, so I've got the bolt out. It does have a lock washer on it, so if that did not come out with it, it was kind of stuck. There's Loctite all over this thing, so keep that in mind. It may be a little tight to break free to begin with. Make sure you hold on to that lock washer, or that you find it somewhere in there. Make sure it doesn't fall on the floor and get lost. So that's one piece there. So I did have to remove my optic in order to access this second bolt here. It was hiding underneath it, so I need to go ahead and get that one removed just the same. All right, so same deal. Make sure that you have your lock washer with your bolt. Do not lose that, drop it on the floor. So in order to remove this top rail, you need to lift up on the back and then pull towards the rear of the weapon. And the reason for that is because this groove right here in the front of your rail system interfaces with this kind of hooked portion right here, so it's going to be wedged in there, so you need to lift up the back and then pull away from this. If you try and pull it forward, you're just going to get stopped by that. So you can go ahead and set your rail section aside. Again, if you're swapping out your aftermarket rail, this is as far as you need to go. You'll just slap the new rail on here in place of the stock one, and then reverse the steps and follow along with the reassembly instructions as I go forward. However, we're not done yet taking this thing apart, so we're going to continue on to the next step, and that is going to include taking apart the sling swivel here. That's what this portion is here. It's kind of a little domed piece with a screw and a little pin down inside of it, and then on this side is the sling swivel. It is reversible, so if you are right or left-handed, you can't put it on either side. I obviously have it in the right-handed shooting configuration. So the first thing we have to do is get this little pin out. You need to swivel it a little bit too to get it to line up so that it's straight here. All right, so we're just going to push that pin. If you can grab a hold of it and pull it, or keep the flat portion of it against some solid object and push, this little pin is going to pop out. You can see it's not very big at all. Again, there's a lot of small pieces that are very easy to get lost. So we'll set that aside with our other parts. Now, we need to unscrew this piece here, but the problem is on the inside of the sling swivel, it is a specific shape. So it has to fall down in the groove on here. Otherwise, if you keep spinning it and it has popped up out of that groove, the screw is just going to spin and it's actually not going to come out. If you have a sling with the QD attachment on it and you snap it in here, that'll probably be your best bet and make it easier for you to not have to think about it or worry. Or you can just look at it, make sure that it's down in the groove that it's supposed to be, and just find some sort of a punch or other tool. Even if you've got a cleaning brush or something you can shove down in there just to make sure that the head of that bolt stays down where it's supposed to be. And then all we're going to do is unscrew this piece. And then we're just going to unscrew it until it comes all the way out. So here is our bolt that is going through there, and you can see what I'm talking about here. The bolt is not all the way around. It does have two flat spots, and it does have to go down into the hole that's designed for it. Now I want to pull the sling swivel out, so I just kind of get a good grip on it and just pull straight out. Set that aside. Next, we're going to remove the forend. Whether you have a aftermarket or stock forend, doesn't matter. It's going to have two Phillips head screws on opposite sides. So this one right here, and then there's one opposite that. So we need to go ahead and remove those. So we'll set that aside. Flip it over and get this one. Now we can remove our handguard. Pull down on the front and then away at the bottom. Again, this contains my scout light switch. It's got everything all in one unit, thankfully, so it all comes off. The stock piece is just a one piece of plastic. This is metal. So we'll set that aside. All right, so now that we have the handguard out of the way, we need to remove the charging handle assembly here so we can go ahead and get the barrel pulled off. So in order to do that, there are two, trying to point this so you can see it, there are two pieces here that will pull away, and that'll allow us to slide this portion up. You kind of have to pull it while you push up until it pops out, and then you can pull the entire assembly out of the weapon. So here's our charging handle assembly all in one piece. We'll set that aside. And then now we are ready to remove our barrel. So in order to do this, you are going to need a specialized tool. I would not recommend using anything but the tool that is designed for this. Don't try and be cheap or lazy or find a way to rig it and do something else and use a flat screwdriver or something that it's not designed for. Get the actual barrel tool that looks like this. And it slots perfectly in here. We have two indicators. We have an L and we have an O. The white line is towards the L, which means locked. Our barrel is locked in place. Obviously, we need to unlock it. We cannot just put this tool in here and turn it. This piece right here has to be pushed in. There is a hole, and then it has kind of like a little keyhole shape, and there's a notch down here. And when we push this hole right here, this little piece flaps up and out of that notch, and that's what we need because this whole assembly is going to rotate, and if that's down in that notch, that's going to prevent this from turning. So we need that lifted out of the way while simultaneously turning on the opposite side. So I've got this kind of pushed down in here, and what I'm going to be doing is pushing this up to keep it out of that notch until we can start getting some rotation going. So I'm going to stand it up, and again, I'm going to put my barrel tool in here And we're going to be rotating this direction. It has arrows on the top. We're staying at the top of the weapon, rotating over to open. So again, I'm pulling up on that little flap on the opposite side with my left hand, and then I'm just giving this a turn, and I am rotating over the top of the weapon. Now, once this makes it again out of the notch, I no longer need to hold it. It is going to kind of waller out a little bit of a hole going around because it is metal versus plastic. Metal is going to win, but we are no longer responsible for holding this. It will spin. We are not completely done unlocking this yet. We're at the halfway point, so I need to put my tool back in there and finish rotating it over until that white line is at the O. And once it reaches that position, I can grab my barrel and the entire assembly will slide out. Now, how easy is that for cleaning your chamber, huh? Now, this notch right here is part of that mechanism that we just turned with the specialized tool. That's what's keeping the barrel from being pulled out and kind of locking it in place. This is the screws where our rail attaches to the top of the weapon. And there we go. So we've got our barrel out. Now, the gas cylinder here will come out as well. It may kind of wiggle a little bit. Yours may be looser or tighter than others. All right, so this should slide forward and then kind of pop up in the front and pop out. This is your gas cylinder. This piece right here is what allows your charging handle to slide through. So if you are swapping this to right or left hand, this will then need to be switched to the other side to make accommodations for that rod for the charging handle to pass through. This just kind of helps keep debris from getting into the back of the weapon. Here's your gas cylinder. This thing's going to be absolutely filthy. If you've got your gun broken down this far and you've done some shooting, it might be a good idea to give this a nice thorough cleaning because it is disgusting in there, as you can see. And this is it. This is as far as you're going to need to break down your weapon. Again, there is nothing else necessary to disassemble here. I am not swapping this to left hand, so I will not be showing you taking this off. However, all it is just a couple screws for this side and taking your brass deflector off and then just swapping it to that the opposite side. So now we have access to clean all down in here, so I am going to go ahead and get that done, and then we're going to come back and we'll get into the reassembly of this weapon from this point backwards. All right, I've got all of my pieces for my weapon cleaned to my satisfaction. We are ready to put this thing back together, so we're basically just going to go in a reverse order of what we just did. So when we look at our gas cylinder, this is all plastic here, and then this metal portion terminates out here and sticks out a little bit, which is where this piece is going to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in with that metal end pointing forward. This flat portion should be up top. Put it down in there between these two plastic. We drop it down in here between these two plastic flaps, and this should slide all the way to the rear so that this is flush. Now, with my weapon sitting here like this, I need to think about my charging handle. So for me, my charging handle is right here. And again, I need to make that space for the pass-through here where it's got that little orientation, or that little opening here for my rod for the charging handle to slide through. So what I need to do, so I can pull that forward and pop that up just a little bit. And then what I do is put this here. And there are notches that's going to kind of line up with so it doesn't wiggle around a whole lot. So we'll push that down flat and then again pull it back to the rear, making sure that it looks a little something like that. So we have our pass-through for our charging handle rod. We're ready to reinsert our barrel. So again, our barrel is just going to slide in here from the front. We have to wiggle it just a little bit. It's going to go all the way to the rear, and we are ready to turn this and lock our barrel back in place so we can get on with the next step. We do not have to worry about this piece on the other side because again, it's already being held up and out of the way. So all we need to do is get our barrel wrench tool, put it in the slot, and then pivot it back towards the locked position. Now, if you're getting any sort of resistance, it's not wanting to go, make sure your barrel is pushed all the way back so that that notch is lined up where it's supposed to be. Continue locking it. So it's going to be a little tight. You should hear it give it a little click. Your white line should now be lined up with the L or locked position. So our barrel is re-secured where we need it to be. So again, going in the reverse order of operations, we need to put our charging handle assembly back in. So this is going to insert first. We need to pay attention to that little piece where we had inserted it or we made a space for it previously. Our charging handle in. We're going to make sure we hit that little gap that we gave ourselves. Make sure we clear the barrel. Just going to kind of finagle it on there. These two wings here that we spread before, we're going to need to spread a little bit to get it to pop down into place. There's kind of a little track that it lines up with. Make sure that our charging handle functions properly. It locks into place. This should be pulled all the way back, and you'll know because this will be lined up. There will not be much of a gap here. It won't be sitting up on top of the plastic, so this is lined up where it's supposed to be. So we've got our charging handle assembly back where it needs to go. Now again, reverse order, we're going to be putting the sling swivel back in place. So because again I am a right-handed shooter, I am putting it on the left side of the weapon. If you look in the bottom portion here, hopefully that's focusing, you can see there's two little notches. Those need to be lined up with the notches that are in the screw holes that are on there, and in this case they are horizontal. So this should be flush here. You can see how that rubs right into it, so we want that pressed in place. We've got our long screw that has two flat sides on it, so we're going to pass that through to the other side. And in doing so, we're going to make sure that that screw goes in the correct orientation and falls down into the notched position where it should be. And then we need to grab this piece again that has the cutout, and we're going to push on that screw from this side to make sure it doesn't come out and just keep spinning, and we're sitting here doing nothing. We're going to put this over that screw, and we're just going to spin it down until it's flush with the weapon. All right, so once it gets tight, we can let go of this side. And now we need to focus on here because we have that little tiny cutter pin that we then need to feed through the hole that's in this screw. So just because this is all the way tight does not mean it's where it needs to be. We may need to loosen it just a little bit. So the hole that this little pin goes in obviously is right here. So we need to make sure that the walls right here are not blocking that hole. If this is the final position and I cannot get my pin in there, this doesn't do me any good. So if you cannot rotate it any further, you're going to need to rotate it back until you can actually get to it. And then this little pin again is going to go inside the hole of that screw. Originally, I push it all the way to the end. It doesn't really matter. I just want to eliminate any possibility of this thing popping out. I push it all the way to the end instead of just the middle portion of that cotter pin. So there's no way, this is going to have to beat two of those little bumps in order to actually fall out for this thing to turn itself off of the weapon and then be lost forever. So now we're ready to put our rail back on the top of this thing. So make sure that again, this notch that's in the front, that you feed that into the notch that's on the front here first, and make sure it fits, and then this will just drop back down on top of the holes. Now make sure again you have your lock washers with your two 4mm bolts. If you do not, make sure you find those before you put this back together. And then I'm going to put some blue Loctite on these, and then I'm going to put them back in and tighten them down. So I've always found it interesting that the blue Loctite comes in the red container, so make sure you double check the name and make sure you're using the blue Loctite, so in the future, if you or anybody else ever intends to take these pieces off again, that they are actually able to do so. So again, I'm just going to put some blue Loctite on these and get them tightened down. All right, I do not have any torque spec settings to give you to say how many inch-pounds these need to be. I just put them on nice and tight. I'm not trying to snap them off in here, but I want them nice and tight and make sure my rail and barrel assembly and everything is locked up and interfacing well and not rattling around while I'm trying to shoot and remain accurate. All right, so now we can put our handguard back on. Very easy process. There's a tab in the back here that kind of needs to feed in and then just rock forward just like that. So then we'll put our two Phillips head screws back in. So again, same thing. You don't want to try and twist this thing and snap it off in there, but we just want to make sure that it's nice and snug so that it's not going to come out. There is no Loctite on these. And then we tighten down the second one. All right, so for the most part, our weapon is back to normal, and then this would be the portion where we just reassemble for basic maintenance and cleaning. So we've done our caliber conversion, left to right hand swap, whatever have you, and we're returning back to now where the gun was when we were just doing basic cleaning. So now we can reassemble our bolt and put that back in the gun. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put our trigger pack back in the weapon. So we need to make sure you have it in the correct orientation. You can tell because of these are the two holes that are oriented with this. So if you're trying to put them in there and they're not making sense and lining up, then flip it around. This is going to fall forward this direction, so that's going to ignite the round and send the bolt forward. So that's the way we want this to face. So we're going to pull this black flappy piece out of the way, slide this in the track till the holes all line up. Make sure it lines back up when that closes back down. And then we're going to push our pins from the other side until they're all the way back up here. And we have this reassembled where it's supposed to be. So let's go ahead and get our bolt put back together. All right, so we've got our gumdrop in place, we've got our extractor, and we've got our pin that goes with it. This is a little bit tight to put together. Usually just put some frog glue paste on my fingers and kind of smear it around everywhere. Okay. So let's go ahead and get our extractor in there. This can be kind of a pain because we do have to squish against that little gumdrop and make sure the holes are lined up so we can slide this pin back in where it came from. In this instance, it went in fairly easy, so we've got our extractor reassembled into our bolt. All right, so now we can go ahead and get our bolt assembly put back together. We've still got this rod pulled all the way to the rear. So this part can get a little bit funky and difficult to show on camera, but so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the spring and we're going to put it back on our firing pin here. So again, the firing pin, the rear portion is kind of like a half moon. And if you look down in here, there's also another half moon shape. So basically we're making the two halves go together. So they're going to be opposite, just to put the two flat ends together. And I'm going to feed the firing pin in from the front all the way through until it reaches the back and it kind of hooks over some notches there. It's going to be sticking out of the front. And I'm going to kind of use that as my guide to slide my bolt over. Now you need to pay attention to which way this is going. So the piston is at the top of the weapon theoretically from the way that I'm holding it. So our extractor for the right hand configuration is going to throw brass out of the right side. So my extractor needs to be up in this orientation with the piston above it. So I'm just going to slide this over the firing pin all the way to the rear. The firing pin is going to move a little bit. You may have to kind of finagle them to get them to stay together, but that's fine. So again, this rod is pulled all the way forward. When I look down in that hole, you're gonna have to spin the bolt a little bit just to get it to clear. And remember that weird flat spot in the firing pin, so we're gonna need to make sure that's oriented properly. So again, line up those two halves of the moon to get the firing pin in the right orientation. You should be able to look straight down this hole and see that it is perfectly symmetrical. We have to flip this over to this side because this is where the head of this is going to go, and you pay attention to where the flat spot is on it because we want that up against the flat wall. That's what's going to help keep it from rotating around. So once we've got that lined up, the flat spot's going to go against that little wall there. Drops in there, so now we know we're in the correct orientation. We've bypassed the flat spot on the firing pin. We've bypassed that groove on the bolt. So we're going to go ahead and push this forward. You can pull it all the way forward if you'd like. Just make sure that it's in there, and that's going to help hold everything in place. So this is ready to now be reinserted into the weapon. All right, so remember this top pin needs to be pushed down. Depending on how you maneuvered and messed with this thing while you were doing your other disassembly and cleaning procedures, the pin may have popped back in. You may not be able to get this out, or it may not close because the pin is up and it's stuck here and you're not able to get it. So just make sure this is open. Make sure that pin is pulled all the way to the left. Our bolt is now ready for insertion with the piston portion of it up and the bolt on the bottom. All we have to do is just slide it in from the rear. You may have to just wiggle it a little bit to get it to go into its appropriate channel. And then the whole assembly will go in. So we flip it up, close our butt pad all the way, and push the pin back through. And there we go. We've got it reassembled. We just need to do a function check to make sure we got it right. So I'm going to grab the charging handle, pull it to the rear, release, do it 3 times. Make sure everything functions right. We're going to try and pull the trigger. We got absolutely no movement, so we're going to flip it on fire. Put it back on safe and pull the trigger, nothing happens. So we are good to go. We have reassembled this now. I did take the optic and the magnifier off. If you followed along, we removed the barrel and put it back, removed the rail and put it back. Just because you've got some fancy high-tech quick detach mount does not mean this thing is going to go right back to absolute zero where you had it. So doing all of this, keep in mind you are going to need to go back to the range and re-zero your optic. It may very well be exactly dead on where you had it, and that's great. But there's also a high possibility that it may be off just a little bit or even a lot of bit. So again, make sure you go re-zero after you remove any optic, barrel, rail, anything from this weapon that you take off that could potentially affect your accuracy, especially if you need to make a very precise shot under stress. The last thing you want to do is have your gun not hit what you're aiming at. So anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys found this video useful in your endeavors for disassembling or reassembling your Tavor. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.